Good evening, and welcome to Utah Valley University. I'm Matthew Brogdon, the director of the Center for Constitutional Studies. Tonight we gather for a musical celebration of the 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence, honoring a moment that redefined the course of human history. We commemorate the birth of a unique American political experiment founded on the revolutionary conviction that all human beings are created equal, with no inherent ruling class among them, none born with saddles on their backs and others booted and spurred to ride them. We celebrate the foundational truth that every human being is endowed with the same natural rights, endowed by their Creator, not by their governments. Rights that should not be alienated or abridged. Governments are instituted to secure these rights, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The American Revolution that bequeathed to us the Declaration of Independence was more than a conflict. It was a profound transformation that secured our independence, established our republic and our union. It identified responsible citizenship with civic virtue, and it articulated our unifying ideals of equality and liberty, embodied in our natural and civil rights. As we enjoy tonight's performance, we recognize that we are today still the stewards of this great legacy. We are responsible for carrying forward these high ideals, making the promise of the Declaration more of a reality for this generation and those that follow. Our first work performed tonight was originally composed by James Stephenson as a musical mirror to our foundational document. This piece honors the American political compact and the revolutionary conviction that all are created equal. To reflect this, Stephenson created a 12-tone row around which the tonal areas of this work are constructed. This is a nod to the early 20th century compositional tradition in which no single tone of the chromatic scale is subservient to another. While this is not a strict 12-tone work, Stephenson does modulate through all 12 tonal centers in the Western musical system. He designed this to be reflective of the lands that make up the United States, from the western to the eastern coasts of the North American continent and beyond. No tonal area receives more weight than another, a musical illustration of the ideal that all men and women are created equal, and that those who come to our union late are fellow countrymen with those who came early.
Thank you.
While the Declaration of Independence gave us the words for our freedom, those words would have meant little without the sacrifice of the soldiers who fought to win the American War for Independence. It was their struggle that alloyed us into an American nation. To understand the cost of that victory, we look back at the freezing winter at Valley Forge. In a letter to Henry Laurens, then President of Congress, George Washington, the commander in the field, described the dire conditions of his men, articulating for us, his posterity, the great cost of securing our independence.
Mr. Laurens, I appeal to you with urgent distress about the state of our soldiers here at Valley Forge. I am completely convinced that unless a major and immediate change is made, this army will be forced into one of three terrible outcomes: starve, dissolve, or disperse in order to search for food. I assure you, sir, this is not an exaggeration. I have more than enough evidence to support what I am saying. Yesterday afternoon, I received word that the enemy had left the city in force and was moving near Philadelphia, intending to gather food from the countryside. I ordered the troops to prepare so I could oppose them with all the strength I had. But to my deep frustration, I learned and sadly confirmed that the men could not move because they were weak from lack of food. And this is not the worst of it. We have seen no soap, vinegar, or other supplies approved by Congress since the Battle of Brandywine 3 months ago. Soap is hardly needed now, as few men even have a full shirt. Many have only half of a shirt, and some have none at all. As further proof of how badly the clothing system has failed, today's report shows that 2,898 men in camp are unfit for duty because they are barefoot or nearly naked. Many others are staying in local hospitals or with farmers for the same reason. Since December 4th, nearly 2,000 more men have become unfit because of exposure and hardship, especially from the lack of blankets. Many soldiers are forced to sit awake by fires all night instead of sleeping. I doubt we can keep the army together much longer. Everything depends on what we do this winter. The success or failure of the next campaign and our glorious cause will almost certainly be decided by the actions of Congress or its inaction now. I have the honor to be, sir, your most obedient servant, George Washington.
That composition, titled When Jesus Wept, is a reworking by William Schuman of an 18th century hymn. The original piece was written by William Billings, whose music reflects the grief and hardship of the Revolutionary period, while expressing deep piety and patriotic fervor. Schuman preserves Billings' original melody, setting it as a round. When Jesus wept the falling tear, in mercy flowed beyond all bound. When Jesus mourned, a trembling fear seized all the guilty world around. The next composition is another reimagining by Schuman of a Billings hymn. Chester was so popular that it was sung throughout the colonies, from Vermont to South Carolina. It became the anthem of the American Revolution, sung around the campfires of the Continental Army and played by fifers on the march. It was a long war, stretching 8 years from Lexington Green in 1775 to the Treaty of Paris in 1783. Billings' music and words expressed well the burning desire for freedom, which sustained the colonists through the difficult years of the Revolution. In Schumann's setting here, you will hear not only Billings' hymn, you will also hear after that the shot heard round the world. Listen for the musket cracks. Following them, Schumann uses the melody and harmony of Billings' hymn to create an emotional exploration of the angst, terror, discipline, courage, and grit that eventually led to the American victory for independence. While the revolutionary generation successfully transformed us into an independent nation dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, those principles faced a harrowing trial. They faced that trial in our Civil War. The sectional conflict over slavery in America divided our Union, threatening to break apart the constitutional order forged at the founding of our nation. In this critical moment, Abraham Lincoln stepped forward with a powerful vision. He reminded his fellow citizens that America was conceived in liberty, and he framed the war as the ultimate test of whether a government of, for, and by the people would grace the lives of future generations or perish from the earth.
Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history. That is what he said. That is what Abraham Lincoln said. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. We here hold the power and bear the responsibility. In giving freedom to the slave, we assure freedom to the free. We shall nobly save or meanly lose the last best hope of earth. He was born in Kentucky, raised in Indiana, and lived in Illinois. And this is what he said. This is what Abe Lincoln said. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every leaving heart and hearthstone, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched by the better angels of our nature. When standing erect, he was 6'4" tall. And this is what he said. He said, "It is the eternal struggle between two principles, right and wrong, throughout the world." And standing in the battlefield of Gettysburg, he said, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Lincoln was a quiet man. Abe Lincoln was a quiet and a melancholy man. But when he spoke of democracy, this is what he said. He said, "As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master." This expresses my idea of democracy. Whatever differs from this, to the extent of the difference, is no democracy. Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of these United States, is everlasting in the memory of his countrymen. For on the battleground at Gettysburg, this is what he said. He said that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to the cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, and that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom and government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
The Declaration of Independence served as a promissory note for the future, establishing a standard of freedom and equality that later generations would use to extend the blessing of full citizenship to more Americans. Abolitionists like Frederick Douglass appealed to the Declaration's promise that all people are created equal, as they fought to end slavery and later to secure the right to vote for black men through the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Their adherence to founding principles reminds us that our national identity includes an ongoing struggle for the full rights and responsibilities of citizenship. That same spirit inspired reformers like Susan B. Anthony, who argued that the Declaration's principles must also apply to women. She devoted her life to advocating for women's suffrage, which was eventually secured through the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. This constant work of improvement is captured in the hymn, America the Beautiful, which serves as a prayer for our nation. America, America, God mend thine every flaw, confirm thy soul in self-control, thy liberty in law.
I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. So indeed, I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them in all places, against all foes, at whatever cost. For the present, it is enough to affirm that manhood of the Negro race is equal. Is it not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, reaping, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships in metals of brass, iron, copper, gold, and silver, that while we are reading, writing, ciphering, and acting as clerks, merchants, secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprise common to other men, living in families as husbands, wives, children, and above all else, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God, hoping for immortality beyond the grave, we are called to prove that we are men? Would you have me argue that men are entitled to liberty? That he has the right to his own body? You have already declared it. Would you have me argue the wrongfulness of slavery? There is no man underneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him.
Nor can you find a word in any of the grand documents left us by the fathers that assumes for government the power to create or to confer rights. The Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution, and the constitutions of the several states, and the organic laws of the territories, all alike proclaim and profess and promote the exercise of the people's God-given rights. The 14th Amendment made constitutional the ideals in the Declaration, protecting the privileges and immunities of its citizens. The only question left to be settled now is, are women persons? And I hardly believe that any of our opponents have the hardihood to say they are not. Being persons, then, women are citizens, and no state shall have a right to create any new laws or enforce any old laws that abridge their privileges and immunities. Hence, every single discrimination against women in the Constitution and laws of the several states is today null and void. Votes for women!
We end our program with John Philip Sousa's Stars and Stripes Forever. This stirring work evokes love of country. As we go home tonight, we recognize that the survival of our constitutional republic depends on more than just words written in 1776. It rests on the civic virtue of each new generation. To keep our republic, we must successfully navigate our deep differences, and we must build strong communities. This means taking on the responsibility of citizenship, engaging with one another in good faith, and working to ensure our laws continue to protect the natural and civil rights of all people. By choosing to preserve our institutions, strengthen our communities, and in Lincoln's lovely phrase, act with malice toward none and charity for all, we honor the inheritance we received from those who came before us, and we ensure that the blessings of liberty endure for our posterity.